Hello, thank you for joining me in this exploration of facilitating restorative justice circles. I'm Rose Gordon, and I've been facilitating restorative justice and teaching it to professionals and community members for 18 years. Restorative justice has informed my personal life and my work in hospice in both the US, Dubai, and India. For me, restorative justice is a living process, and our facilitation can support that aliveness. It can bring a dynamic flavor to the encounters of the people in our circles. So what I'll share with you today is what I've learned about effectively facilitating restorative justice and supporting our capacity to bring a deep, steady, and effective presence to the restorative justice circles that we facilitate. I encourage you to make this full screen because, as you can see, I have a slide beside me, and that slide maybe some of the words may occasionally be too small for you to read if you keep it in a small format. If you expand it to full size, I think you'll be able to read each slide, and sometimes I won't be on the screen at all, and just the slide will be here for you to review. Restorative justice. It's aimed at repairing harm, restoring community, and restoring safety. So what skills and practices can we develop so that our facilitation is fair, even-handed, and trustworthy? Where do we need to take risks in facilitating a restorative justice circle? How do we maintain a deeply human and professional stance during our facilitation? And how do we care for ourselves and each other? These are the questions I want to delve into with you. One challenge I want to mention that I have seen is that it's important to develop some ways of measuring our effectiveness that go beyond what are usually called effective outcomes, which are numeric. They're very measurable. What I'm talking about is more qualitative ways of telling and observing the circle. So sometimes for me, seeing an offender, an identified offender and an identified victim truly engage with each other, look at each other in the eye, that means that the circle itself is being effective. Or perhaps there's laughter, which there often is, or smiles. That's another sign of effectiveness to me, because what I'm aimed at is repairing the circle of community that has been harmed or damaged by the offense that happened. So if I see an expression of empathy on someone's face or tears, then I know that there is something happening, that the circle is truly alive, and that's what I'm aimed at. My response to the questions that I just asked you are held in just a few intentions and practices. But first, what has love got to do with it? Mahatma Gandhi said, where there's love, there's life. Where there's love, there's life. And the love that he's referring to is a verb. It's alive and fluid. It's spacious action and receptive action. It invites us to care, to listen deeply, to appreciate and respect one another, to speak from the heart and to listen from the heart. That is love far beyond the romantic connotations that we may have been enculturated to recognize. It's a deep, abiding love, and I think it's tremendously important in the work that we do in restorative justice. Restorative justice is a life-giving activity. It's life-affirming process, and that's all about love and all about action. So it's a fierce and alive kind of dynamic that we're engaged with. And that asks for us to receive and deliver respect, to really pay attention to the responsibility, the ability to respond of each person in the circle, and an accountability, which is very different from blame. To me, restorative justice is deeply relational, and it's a practice. It's a healing response to harm and injury. So our facilitation needs to have building and maintaining relationship at the core of what we do. And when I refer to the word healing, I'm referring to a process of wholeness, restoring wholeness, because healing and wholeness both come from the same Latin root. So when we bring together people in a circle and ask them questions that allow them to name harms, to express ideas for repairing the harm, to talk about their understanding of their own actions, we are giving them an opportunity to reweave relationship among the people in that circle. That's the fabric of community, and the well-being and the future of our communities, our families, our countries, our world depends on reweaving what has been broken. Facilitation means a conscious act. It's a conscious act. It's a process. It's a process of asking questions and ensuring that everyone's voice is heard. And at the same time, we're taking cues from the participants in our circle. So the intention of the circle, at which I have outlined on this slide, they determine how we facilitate, because they're telling us the direction. These intentions name the direction we're headed. What we need to know as facilitators is that we are balancing and honoring the goals that are named on the slide. We're balancing those with the will and the needs of the group as they arise, and we're following their lead. So we're guiding, but we are not in charge. We're not forcing a process. We're paying a lot of attention to what's going on so that we can aim at satisfying these goals and keep the process alive and human and fluid. We are living justice, I believe, when we bring these following 4 qualities and actions to the way we facilitate restorative justice. So we can develop skills in these areas: hospitality and receptivity, deep listening, not knowing, and attention to self and others. I will speak about each of these qualities each directly, not indirectly, but sometimes indirectly as we go along. So there's both some very named qualities, and they're also subtle. There's a subtlety to what we're doing, and it lends itself to creating a dynamic and powerful experience, both for ourselves and for those who are with us. We are all vulnerable. We're all reachable in this process, and we need to be. So again, I think I'll expand this again for you. Hospitality and receptivity, deep listening, not knowing, and attention to self and others. These are the qualities that make justice alive. Hospitality. Hospitality and receptivity create an atmosphere that I've named here: warm, respectful, appreciative, even-handed, and trustworthy. And in the few global surveys that have been conducted, those qualities, the warmth, the respectfulness, the even-handedness, and the trustworthiness, was what those folks who were served by restorative justice felt made it a decent process. So to be hospitable, we welcome people into the room and into the circle. We share information with them. Everybody gets to see the same posters about our intentions or guidelines, why we're there together. And we're transparent. Everybody is seeing the same information, and we're even-handed in that welcome by looking everybody in the eye, if that's culturally appropriate, and making our tone of voice even for all the people involved, and our gestures even. So we protect the integrity of the process and the participants using our role as facilitators. And we do that by holding people accountable with good humor and respect. So we're even-handed. We're even-handed. Hospitality opens the door. It's the way we say, welcome, we want you here. Welcome, we want you here. And we do that through introductions. We do that through seating arrangements. If it's appropriate, we shake hands with people as they come in. So know what culture you're operating in. And if you put your hand out for a handshake, wait a moment, is it taken or not? Right? So we have introductions, we have a seating arrangement that's specific for restorative justice, and I'll share that with you as we go along. We have food and drink available if possible, because those are our ways of being hospitable, and usually we would share those at the end of the circle. And information, as I said, is shared with everybody in a transparent way. And in that way, hospitality is expressed. And I would ask you to consider, in the spaces where you live, in the spaces and places and cultures, what are some standard ways of showing hospitality? How do people show hospitality where you live? Here's the seating diagram I mentioned, and this really does need to be expanded. And it still may be hard for you to see, my apologies. At the center is an open space. This is a very intentional diagram. The center of the circle is always open, no table. Sometimes something of meaning to everybody is put at the center. And once for a sports team where there'd been violence among the team members, we had one of the team's trophies in the center. That had meaning to everybody. I often ask people to imagine a fire in the center of the circle and tell them that their words matter, that their words are like sticks being added to the fire and keeping the fire burning, that everybody's participation mattered, but that nobody was required to speak. I would also advise a talking piece, something that can be handed from person to person. Sometimes we just use a nice stone that you can hold in your hand. There's something about holding something in your hand that you can kind of rub or touch, a feather, a stone, a stick. It gives people something to focus on, something tactile, and sometimes it seems to help the words rise up from the body. So we're all very vulnerable in these circles. We, as well as the participants, are vulnerable. And we are asking them in the circle to be vulnerable. And one way that we respect that vulnerability is by extending positive regard and appreciation towards everyone who is there with us. I want to show you this diagram again because the identified offender and identified victim are across from one another so that we can see their responses to each other. And another way of hospitality and welcome is to ensure some safety and comfort. So on each side of the identified offender and victim, we have a support person that they identified is there in the circle with them. That might be a social worker, family members, if they're children, for sure. You want guardians there. It could be a therapist. Just somebody that matters to them, somebody that is there as a witness and is also there to make a contribution. And that helps keep people safe. They feel supported. This is, again, a space of warmth and respect where we can, because of the warmth and respect, really call on people to be accountable in a way they may or may not have been before. Receptivity. It's also a stance of welcoming. It requires us as facilitators to be humble and vulnerable. We do that by taking pauses when we need to. Breathe in. And sometimes I might say to a group, oh, what you just said was, without exaggeration, what you just said was really touched me, and I need a moment to just let it sink in. Thank you so much for what you shared. I invite us all to just take a moment and just hear what was said. They follow. It works. Consider this, that if you have a sheet of film and you expose it to light just for a second, we suddenly see what was unseen. Something is illuminated, something comes to life. And I think that our good questions, how we decide the order of who speaks, how we check for understanding, how we respond to what we're hearing, all of that allows things to come to light. It allows things to be revealed that may not have been seen before. So we can choose our questions and decide who in the circle should speak first by what will best serve the circle, what will best shed light on things that reduces resistance and allows more receptivity to emerge, because it's that receptivity, the water of relaxation and receptivity, that's going to allow the fluidness that we need in the circle to be present. This is not a formulaic process. There are goals, there's a toolbox we can develop, but each circle, as you know, is unique. And we're unique every day as we facilitate it. So we want to keep it alive, and we want to think about what we're doing, what will best serve the circle, what will illuminate things, and leave room for surprise. We may be very surprised. I've often had with two juveniles, one set of parents thinking, you know, this all happened because the other parents don't have any rules. Their kid can do whatever they want, that sort of thing. And so I thought, okay, the parent who expressed those feelings about the other family, they need to hear what I've heard from the other family. They do have rules and they do care. So I had the other family speak first. That shed some light on things right away, and it softened what was happening between these two families. So again, how can our questions be very relevant and help illuminate what is going on and what needs to happen next? Deep listening. Deep listening is crucial. It was step 2 out of those 4. Deep listening lets people know that they matter. Deep listening is an act of respect, and it gives birth to trust. And trust and respect are essential to our circles. So listen the way dry earth receives rain. So I've spent 50 years in northern New Mexico. I observed dry earth receiving rain. If we can listen the way dry earth receives rain, so much can happen. So dry earth can receive rain only if it's porous and absorbent. When the earth gets too hard packed, when our ideas are too hard packed, the rain, the words, the new information slides right off. So for us to listen in this kind of way, we need to soften and allow ourselves to absorb what we're hearing. And when we do that, others in the circle will follow suit. Somehow it's almost instinctual. They hear our tone of voice. They see us be surprised. They see us be genuinely interested and appreciative, and they soften as well, because everybody comes into these circles tense. This is not an easy, soft process. Being accountable, sitting in a circle with people where there's been conflict, with no table in between you, no rehearsed words to say. That makes us vulnerable. That in itself is softening. And we want to keep things soft that way, as if what we hear might be exactly what we need to hear, as if the words that are being spoken are something that might nourish us and nourish the circle and touch both our heart and our mind. If we listen as if the words we're hearing are fresh and new and important, and we're engaged and interested, the people who are with us will follow our lead, because we are being visible. We are being visible. And I would also say here that we ask golden questions. These are questions that are relevant to the situation, and we can ask for clarification. If we're listening, we can say, are you saying this or something else? So we listen in a way that allows new insights. We take care to listen. We take time to listen. We lean in to listen. I like this quote. This says, as you can read, listening is an intentional act. You have to put yourself out to do it. You have to put yourself out to do it. Putting ourselves aside, putting ourselves out in order to listen takes effort. So we put aside thinking about what's for dinner, what's the outcome of what we had planned, what opinions we've already developed about people in the circle. We have to let all of that go. So not our intelligence, not our instincts, not our wisdom, not our intentions, but everything else. We are simply present for what is happening in this circle right now. And this is an essential aspect of facilitation, because we put ourselves out of the picture in order to listen. We make the effort to set ourselves aside, and then we can step into new territory, the territory of someone else's life. We receive information, and that's an intentional act. It's an intentional decision. I would also suggest this. We listen with appreciation. And appreciation is a recognition of the good qualities of someone else. And it's an ability to understand the worth and importance of something. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. So important. And here's a beautiful quote, I think, by Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor. He said, "We must not see any person as an abstraction. Instead, we must see in every person a universe with its own secrets, with its own treasures, with its own source of anguish, and with some measure of triumph." I think people, when we look at them that way, when they know we are seeing them in that way, and we express it in words, or perhaps not in words, but in our body language, they know they've been seen. They know that they matter, and that encourages them to step forward even more. So not an abstraction. These are three-dimensional living beings, and so are we. And the time we're spending together is precious. And I can see in their life a moment of triumph. And they may have been through a lot, but there is a moment of triumph, and they want to be recognized for it. Perhaps it's the job they got. Perhaps it's the effort they've put into raising their children under very difficult situations. Whatever it is, can we appreciate it? Can we appreciate it so that they step forward with more of who they are? I also want to say here, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And when we appreciate the power of the restorative justice process, we can see that this is true. The living dynamic of the restorative justice process can allow a group wisdom to arise in unexpected and wonderful ways. And it's always more than any of us bring as individuals. There's some mystery, something different that enters into that, so that 2 and 2 become 5 in a way, not just 4. And we need to, I believe, leave room for that mystery so that, again, this is a living, dynamic process. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Not knowing, this is such an essential piece of facilitation. The map is not the landscape. The map is just simply not the landscape. We can be tempted to use the information from hearsay or case notes to create a map, a detailed drawing of somebody's life, a detailed drawing, a map of their life and their behavior. But that's not the living truth of what's happening. And I learned this once with a young man who, he killed his friend. They were both gang members. And when I read his case file, he had a father in prison for murder. He had uncles in mental institutions for killing people. And here I was sitting alone with him. The guard was outside the room and I was in our offices, and I had never done this before, but I had the case file on my lap as some, I guess, unconscious way. I wasn't sitting behind the table. I did move forward to be in the room with him, but I had that case file on my lap and I listened to his story. And then he said something about that the elders in the gang had told him what to do. And I said, well, I don't know anything about gangs. Would you explain some of this to me? And I took the file off my lap and set it aside. Well, the whole time we had been together, it was probably, I'm not sure how long it was into the process, 10, 15 minutes. He had been tapping his leg like that. And I'd been sitting there with the file on my lap and he was tapping his leg. When I took that file away and asked him to tell me more about his life and the structure of the life he was living in a gang, he stopped tapping his leg and he started to speak. And we really got to understand each other in a way that we would not have gotten to if I had kept the file on my lap and he had kept his tapping. So in my movement to make myself more vulnerable and express more interest and let him know that I did not know the lay of the land, I didn't know his life, he opened up. And after he had explained things to me, I said, you know, I took a risk. I said, when I first read your file, I thought, wow, this kid sounds dangerous, but I don't feel that way about you right now. I don't feel that way. Thank you for your sharing. Because he was very vulnerable in what he told me about the incident of killing his friend, which was a miserable accident of 13-year-olds. When I told him that, when I said, I no longer feel the way I felt when I read your file, he said to me, you know, miss, I hear that a lot. I hear that from a lot of people. They know my history and I hear that they're afraid of me. But I'm more than what's in that file. That file, he told me, that file has a lot of information about me, but I'm more than that. I'm so much more than that. It was just a beautiful encounter. And obviously I've never forgotten it. And it was many years ago. So not knowing, setting aside what we think we know, asking for information if we need it. This was outside the circle. It was during a pre-conference, allowing for some surprise, allowing for a new understanding to arise. That's not knowing, because the map is not the landscape. Stay alert to the process, stay alert to the moment. Attention to self and other. I think this is, again, so important because so much of our communication is nonverbal. What's our body language saying? Are we relaxed? What's their body language saying? Are they worried? Are they nervous? What else might be happening? And how are we going to respond? Which is the big question always. How are we going to respond to what we're learning as we pay attention to our body language? I noticed the folder on my lap and thought, wow. And I had been taking some deep breaths. I will acknowledge that. I often, you can do it so subtly, right? You just breathe in and kind of reassure yourself everything's okay, right? I wasn't really in any danger. I noticed that I had that file on my lap. I noticed his tapping, and then I noticed that they stopped synchronous or spontaneously, but at the same time, right? So notice the body language of the people that you're with, and then respond. And that respond might be taking a breath or inviting everybody, as I said before, to just telling the truth, be transparent, be vulnerable, be human, use your role to serve the circle. It makes it all worthwhile, right? So we're protecting the integrity of the circle by doing what we need to take care of ourselves and trust that other people in the circle may need it as well. Take a pause. Is it time to have a bathroom break for everybody, or a stretch break, or something else? Do what you need to do and pay attention to what you're seeing. If I see a frown on someone, I'm not going to put them on the spot in a way that might embarrass or humiliate. But I might say, I have a sense that there are some concerns in the circle that we haven't heard yet. I'm going to pass the talking stick around so that those of you who have a concern that hasn't been expressed about what happened can do that now, because I'm just feeling that there are some unsaid things. And if nobody says anything, nobody says anything, but at least we have stepped forward. We have stepped forward and responded. We've used our eyes and our ears. We've been listening and paying attention. And that's the best we can do. So again, what are other people saying with their body language? What's going on? How can we best respond? I also want to say about learning and change that we want participants to be comfortable enough to keep tensions manageable, but discomfort is a necessary piece of learning. Discomfort is a necessary piece of learning. So at the beginning of the circle and in our welcome, we're providing a comfort zone physically, the seating, the snacks, a kind welcome, information, reassurance that we're going to respect the capacity of everyone to be accountable, and that everything that's said is going to be confidential, those kinds of things. We do what we can for the comfort zone, but everybody will be uncomfortable. I've never been in a circle that didn't have tension at the beginning, and I've never been in one where the tension hadn't dissolved by the end. We can see the tension in people's speech, in their body language. It's normal. We tell them where the bathroom is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We make the chairs spread apart so that they have the physical room they need. We pay attention so we can see where there's resistance or anxiety. And we allow for the discomfort. We can make temperature, I call it temperature adjustments if necessary, again, by taking a pause or using humor or creating a shared physical activity. But remember that learning and change happen in the discomfort zone, not in the comfort zone. And I saw this enacted in Thailand. I was facilitating a training in restorative justice for 17 young professionals from 34 countries. And some of them were from countries that had not gotten along. It was a conflict resolution 3-week conference. And they were roommates. India and Pakistan were roommates. A lot of Muslim countries were there, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, and people from Japan, from Burma, from Bangladesh, just from all over the world. There were only 3 Americans. And there was so much that was unusual for people, right? So there was some discomfort. It was inherent in the setting, and we were exploring political alliances and the history of political problems and cultural disagreements. So this was some raw exploration, a lot of discomfort and subtle discomforts. The folks from Afghanistan and India felt that the food in Thailand was too sweet, right? They always wanted more red chili. They brought more red chili to every meal, the hosts. They they were roommates with countries that they weren't comfortable with, people from countries they weren't comfortable with necessarily. And the weather in Thailand is usually quite warm. So the showers, they don't heat water, it's cold water. Well, the fellows from Afghanistan and Iran and Pakistan and India in particular, those countries, they like to bathe at least once a day or shower at least once a day, if not more. And the water was cold and the weather was cold for Thailand. And the hosts of that conference had, what is it called? It's called demand hot water heaters installed in each room within 24 hours after hearing the complaints, because they added up all the discomforts and they thought, we're getting too near the alarm zone. So there's a comfort zone, there's a discomfort zone where learning happens, and then there's an alarm zone. And when we enter the alarm zone, we head back for the comfort zone fast, and that means learning has stopped. I'll show you a diagram in a moment. They were so sensitive and took such immediate action to keep things from getting into the alarm zone. We want to avoid the alarm zone. So that means we really have to pay attention. So I'm speaking very quickly in this presentation. I do not speak this quickly in a restorative justice circle because I want to have time to see people. I don't need a lot of time, but I want to check out the circle as I'm speaking. I want to see where questions or statements among the participants, where are those landing in other people? What's going on? So those folks, those hosts, I was just so impressed that they saw different food, different housemates, raw material, emotional, real stuff. That's plenty. And now we're going to talk about conflict resolution, and that's enough discomfort. We're going to make sure they at least have hot water for their showers, and then everything just settled down, So something for us to pay attention to as well. And it also is important in this to remember the thing about discomfort, that don't give up discomfort in order to be nice. We can be kind and respectful and appreciative and still allow the necessary discomfort. We're talking about offenses. We're talking about places where harm has happened. We don't want to lose the learning zone out of fear of not being nice enough. I trust you will be nice enough. So here's the diagram. They call it a learning zone. The comfort zone, the learning zone, which is the discomfort zone, and then the alarm zone or fear zone, where things just go too far for people. So we want to pay attention to that. And then again, it may mean that we need a pause. If we see people going into the alarm zone, like they're shaking or not listening, or you just see that they're rattled, you want to take care of it. Somehow bring them back. Come back to the learning zone. A little bit of discomfort. Trust they can handle that. Wow. Thank you so much for what you just said. Boy, this has been intense. Tell the truth. Be transparent. That's also comforting for people. They're not alone in feeling that things feel intense, right? So we're building relationship, our relationship with each person in the world, in the room, and our relationship with the material, our relationship with our instincts and what our experience tells us. All of that matters. All of that matters. So I want to just review for a moment the pieces, the 4 qualities that I think really make a difference in facilitating: hospitality and receptivity, deep listening, not knowing, and attention to self and other. These all go together. These qualities mesh together. We weave them together to be the container for the circle, the loom on which the warps and wefts of experience and worlds and understanding are all being woven together into this fabric we call community, where we understand that when we break a thread, it leaves a hole in the fabric, and the whole fabric is weakened. So I want to thank you for sharing your time with me. I hope it's been useful. I'm excited for each of you who are already doing restorative justice, and for those that come and just beginning, because it will affect our lives. It does become part of how we see the world and how we restore ourselves and our families and our workplaces and all the spaces that we enter, that we can bring healing, wholeness to what we're doing in the world. So I want to thank you for being here. And if you have questions, please contact me at redroses@taosnet.com or through the organizers here, whatever is most appropriate. And if you put RJ in the subject, I know that it's not a spam and it won't end up in my trash, so I can respond to you. That's redroses@taosnet.com. And again, thank you so much for the work that you do in the world and your generosity of heart and spirit. Bye-bye.